Shadows on the wall. Sophia. Reed adjusted the collar of her simple blue dress, hoping it looked elegant enough for Bellevue Heights, the restaurant Marcus had chosen for their anniversary dinner. 6 years of marriage, and she still felt like an outsider in her husband's world of finance and luxury. "Are you wearing that?" Marcus appeared in the doorway, his custom-tailored suit impeccable as always. His eyes narrowed slightly at her modest outfit. "I thought it was nice," Sophia said, her fingers brushing against the fabric. It was the most expensive dress she owned, bought specifically for occasions with Marcus's colleagues and family. "It's fine," he said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "We're meeting with the Harringtons tonight. Richard might discuss that investment opportunity I mentioned." Sophia nodded, understanding that tonight wasn't really about their anniversary. It was another business dinner where she'd be expected to smile politely and not say anything that might embarrass her husband. The restaurant glowed with candlelight and quiet conversation when they arrived. The Harringtons were already seated, Richard with his imperious gaze and his wife Victoria with her perfect smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Marcus, finally!" Richard rose to shake his hand. "And Sophie, lovely as always." "It's Sophia," she corrected gently, but her voice was lost as they all sat down. Dinner progressed as these evenings typically did, discussions of market trends, property values, and subtle displays of wealth disguised as casual conversation. Sophia remained quiet, occasionally offering a smile when eyes turned her way. "So, Sophie," Victoria leaned forward, "Marcus tells us you're painting as a hobby?" "It's more than a hobby," Sophia said, finding her voice. "I teach art at Westlake Community Center. I'm actually preparing some pieces for—" "She dabbles," Marcus interrupted with a dismissive wave. "Nothing serious." Sophia felt the familiar sting of his dismissal, but continued. "Actually, I've been invited to submit work for the Meridian Gallery's Emerging Artist Showcase next month." The table fell silent. Marcus's jaw tightened visibly. "How quaint," Victoria offered, exchanging glances with her husband. "The Meridian?" Richard chuckled. "Isn't that the place downtown with the strange installations in the windows? Rather avant-garde for my taste." "It's actually quite prestigious," Sophia said, her cheeks warming. "The curator personally invited me after seeing my work at a community exhibition." Marcus set his fork down with a quiet clink against fine china. "Sophia, perhaps we could discuss your hobbies another time?" "It's not a hobby, Marcus. It's my work." The words came out stronger than she intended. Marcus's face hardened. He turned to Richard with a forced smile. "You'll have to forgive my wife. She gets enthusiastic about her little projects." "I don't need forgiveness for having a passion," Sophia replied, her heart pounding. The tension at the table was palpable. Victoria cleared her throat and began discussing a charity gala, but Marcus wasn't finished. "This is precisely why I hesitate to bring you to these dinners," he muttered, voice low but audible to everyone at the table. "You're becoming an embarrassment, Sophia." The words hung in the air. Richard and Victoria pretended sudden interest in their meals. Sophia sat frozen, the humiliation washing over her in waves. "Excuse me," she finally managed, placing her napkin beside her barely touched meal and rising from the table. She walked to the restroom on unsteady legs, locked herself in a stall, and pressed her palms against cool marble walls to stop them from shaking. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself, this small, diminished version of who she once was. When had she allowed herself to become this person? When had she started believing Marcus's assessment of her worth? Her phone buzzed with a text from Nina, her closest friend. "How's the anniversary dinner going?" Sophia stared at the message, tears blurring her vision. 6 years of trying to fit into Marcus's world, of shrinking herself to avoid being an embarrassment. She took a deep breath, straightened her shoulders, and typed, "It's over. Brushstrokes of change." The morning light filtered through the curtains of Nina's guest room where Sophia had spent the night after the disastrous anniversary dinner. She hadn't returned home, couldn't face Marcus after his humiliating words. Instead, she'd called Nina from the restaurant, voice trembling as she recounted what happened. "He's done this before," Nina had said when Sophia arrived at her apartment. But never so publicly? This isn't love, Soph. Now, nursing a cup of tea at Nina's kitchen island, Sophia scrolled through the dozen missed calls from Marcus. His text messages ranged from angry, "You're overreacting as usual," to falsely contrite. "You know I didn't mean it that way." "He's called me 3 times," Nina said, entering the kitchen in her robe. "I didn't answer." "Thank you," Sophia murmured. "I don't know what to do next." "You do," Nina replied, squeezing her shoulder. "You just need to find the courage to do it." Sophia's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Marcus, but an email from Eliza Chen, the curator at Meridian Gallery. "Following up on our conversation, submission deadline for the Emerging Vision Showcase is in 6 weeks. Looking forward to seeing your work." Nina peered over her shoulder. "That's it. That's your next step." "Marcus says the gallery isn't worth my time," Sophia said automatically, then winced at how quickly she'd defaulted to his judgment. "And what do you think?" Nina challenged. Sophia closed her eyes, remembering the first time she'd walked into Meridian, the soaring ceilings, the light streaming through skylights, the vibrant works that made her heart race with possibility. Before Marcus, she would have leaped at this opportunity without hesitation. "I think I need to paint," Sophia said finally. Over the next week, Sophia moved through her life in a daze. She returned home to collect clothes and her art supplies while Marcus was at work. She arranged a leave of absence from her teaching position. Nina cleared space in her second bedroom for a makeshift studio. Marcus's calls became less frequent, his messages more calculating. "Your little tantrum has gone on long enough," he wrote. "The Prestons are hosting dinner next week. They're expecting us both." Sophia didn't respond. Instead, she stood before a blank canvas for the first time in months. Brush in hand, something awakening inside her that had been dormant for too long. Her first attempts were frustrating. Uncertain lines, hesitant colors. Years of Marcus's subtle criticisms had left her second-guessing every stroke. But gradually, as days passed, something began to emerge from the canvases. Raw, imperfect, but undeniably powerful. "These are incredible," Nina said one evening, standing in the doorway of the makeshift studio. "They're different from your older work." Sophia stepped back, examining the series taking shape, abstract forms that somehow captured the sensation of breaking free, of breath finally filling lungs. "They're honest," she said simply. 3 weeks into her self-imposed exile, Nina returned home with news. "I ran into Daniel Torres today. He owns that new gallery in the Arts District. He's friends with Eliza at Meridian. I mentioned your work, and he wants to see it." "I'm not ready," Sophia protested. But Nina was already typing on her phone. "He's coming tomorrow at noon," Nina announced. "And before you panic, he's not some stuffy art critic. He used to be a corporate lawyer until he quit to open his gallery. He understands transitions." Daniel Torres arrived precisely at noon the next day. Tall, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses, he moved through Nina's apartment with a quiet intensity, studying each of Sophia's completed canvases. "These are powerful," he said finally. "There's anger here, but something else too. Hope, maybe." "They're very personal," Sophia admitted. "The best art always is," Daniel replied. "Eliza was right about you." He handed her his card. "I have a small showing next week. Local artists, intimate setting. I'd like to include 2 of these pieces, if you're willing." After he left, Sophia stared at his card, a strange lightness in her chest. For the first time in years, someone had seen her work, really seen it, without filters or judgment. More importantly, she had created something true, something entirely her own. That evening, Marcus appeared at Nina's door unannounced. "This has gone on long enough," he said when Sophia reluctantly let him in. "You've made your point. It's time to come home." Sophia led him to the makeshift studio. "This is what I'm doing now." Marcus surveyed the canvases with thinly veiled disdain. "This is why you've abandoned our marriage? For finger paintings?" Once his dismissal would have crushed her. Now she felt only clarity. "No, Marcus. I left because you called me an embarrassment. Because you've been calling me that in different ways for years." She gestured to the paintings. "These are being shown next week, and I've submitted an application for the Meridian Showcase. You can't be serious, he scoffed. You're throwing away everything we've built for this hobby? It's not a hobby, Sophia said, the words steady and sure. It's who I am. And I'm not throwing anything away. I'm finding myself again. Colors of Courage. The small showing at Daniel's gallery, Echo Arts, exceeded all of Sophia's expectations. Her two paintings, hung in a prime location near the entrance, drew clusters of attendees throughout the evening. She stood nervously to the side, watching strangers engage with her most vulnerable emotions made visible. They're connecting with your work, Daniel said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of wine. That's the greatest gift an artist can hope for. I still can't believe they're actually here. That people are looking at them, Sophia admitted, accepting the wine gratefully. Get used to it, Daniel smiled. Eliza from Meridian is here. She's impressed? Across the room, Nina gave her an enthusiastic thumbs up while chatting with a tall woman Sophia recognized as the curator from Meridian Gallery. By the end of the evening, 3 people had left their cards, inquiring about commissions. Eliza Chen had personally encouraged her Meridian submission, and Daniel had invited her to use the small studio space above his gallery. It gets excellent northern light and it's sitting empty. The night was a victory, small but significant. For the first time in years, Sophia had stood on her own, presented her work without apology, and been recognized for her talent rather than as an extension of her husband. The following weeks passed in a blur of creativity. Sophia settled into the studio above Echo Arts, working with an intensity that surprised even herself. The deadline for Meridian loomed, pushing her to refine her submission pieces, a series she'd privately titled Unbecoming, charting her emotional journey from confinement to liberation. Daniel often stopped by, bringing coffee and thoughtful critiques that challenged her to push further. Their friendship grew naturally, built on mutual respect and shared passion for art. Sometimes they worked late into the evening, Daniel on gallery business while Sophia painted, comfortable silences punctuated by easy conversation. You never talk about your husband, Daniel remarked one evening as they shared takeout on the studio floor. Sophia's brush paused mid-stroke. Ex-husband, maybe. I don't know what we are right now. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pried. It's okay, she said, realizing she needed to articulate the truth. Marcus built a life and expected me to fit into it. When I didn't, perfectly, I became an embarrassment. His loss, Daniel said simply, and the gentleness in his voice made something flutter in her chest. The moment was interrupted by her phone. Marcus again. Though his calls had decreased, he persisted with a determination that might have seemed romantic if Sophia didn't recognize the controlling intent behind it. This time she answered, I'll be at the apartment tomorrow to collect more of my things, she said before he could speak. I'd prefer if you weren't there. This is ridiculous, Sophia, Marcus replied, his voice tight. You've had your little artistic adventure. It's time to be reasonable? I am being reasonable, she countered, for the first time in years. The next day, she arrived at their shared apartment to find Marcus waiting despite her request. He looked immaculate as always, but strain showed around his eyes. You've lost weight, he noted, his voice softer than she expected. I've been busy. Sophia moved past him toward the bedroom. Marcus followed. I spoke with Richard Harrington. He's willing to forget your outburst at dinner. We can move past this. Sophia turned, truly looking at him for the first time since that night. The man she had once loved so desperately now seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. You still don't understand, she said. This isn't about the Harringtons or that dinner. This is about years of making me feel small, Marcus. Years of treating my passion like an embarrassing quirk you had to manage. I supported you, he protested. I paid for your supplies, your classes. Financial support isn't the same as respect, Sophia interrupted. You never respected me or my art. His expression hardened. Because it's not respectable, Sophia. It's a childish fantasy. These gallery people are humoring you, nothing more. The words stung, but not as deeply as they once would have. My submission for Meridian is nearly finished. she said, gathering the clothes she'd come for. You should come to the opening next month. See for yourself what I'm capable of. You're making a mistake, Marcus called as she headed for the door. When this art phase inevitably fails, don't expect me to be waiting. Sophia paused, hand on the doorknob. That's the difference between us now, Marcus. I don't consider failure the worst outcome anymore. Living without trying would be much worse. Back at the studio, Sophia channeled the encounter's emotions directly onto canvas, bold strokes of defiance and determination. When Daniel found her there hours later, she was splattered with paint and surrounded by her most powerful work yet. Are you okay? He asked, concern evident in his voice. Sophia stepped back from the canvas, surveying what she'd created, a phoenix-like form emerging from shadowy constraints. I think I finally am, she answered truthfully. The Gallery of Truth, the Meridian Gallery's main exhibition hall, buzzed with anticipation. Emerging Visions had become one of the city's most anticipated art events, and tonight's opening promised to be spectacular. Sophia stood in a quiet corner, barely recognizing herself in the elegant black dress Nina had insisted she wear, her hair swept up in a style that felt both sophisticated and authentic. Nervous? Daniel appeared beside her, handsome in a charcoal suit that made his eyes seem even warmer. Terrified, Sophia admitted, but in a good way. Her submission, a triptych titled Unbecoming, had not only been accepted, but given prominent placement in the main hall. The 3 large canvases chronicled her emotional journey, the first depicting constraint and diminishment through shadowy forms and restricted color, the second capturing the chaotic energy of breaking free, the third exploding with light and possibility. Your work deserves to be here, Daniel assured her, briefly touching her arm. The contact was fleeting but sent warmth spreading through her. Over the past weeks, their friendship had deepened into something neither of them had named, something careful and tender, growing in the margins of their conversations. Sophia! Nina rushed over, resplendent in emerald green. People are already asking about you. Eliza says there's a collector from New York specifically interested in your series. Before Sophia could respond, the gallery lights dimmed slightly, the signal that the formal portion of the evening was beginning. Eliza Chen, elegant and commanding, stood at the center of the hall to welcome attendees and introduce the featured artists. As Sophia listened to Eliza describe her work, raw emotional honesty rendered with technical brilliance, a movement near the entrance caught her attention. Marcus had arrived, flanked by the Harringtons and several other couples from his social circle. He scanned the room with an expression of practiced indifference that Sophia recognized as his defense against unfamiliar territory. Her stomach tightened, but Daniel's reassuring presence beside her steadied her nerves. This was her night, her triumph. After Eliza's introduction, attendees dispersed throughout the gallery. Sophia found herself surrounded by admirers, art critics, and fellow artists, all eager to discuss her work. For someone who had spent years being invisible at Marcus's business functions, the attention was both overwhelming and exhilarating. Your use of negative space in the first panel is extraordinary, an older woman in striking architectural jewelry commented. The emptiness speaks volumes. The transition between the second and third pieces creates a powerful narrative arc, added a bearded critic whose review in the city's arts magazine could make or break emerging artists. Sophia responded thoughtfully to each comment, surprising herself with her own articulate passion. This was her language, her world. Here she wasn't an embarrassment, she was essential. From across the room, she occasionally caught glimpses of Marcus. He moved through the crowd with his usual confidence, but she could read the tension in his shoulders, the slight crease between his brows that appeared whenever he felt out of his depth. Eventually, inevitably, they found themselves face to face before her triptych. Congratulations, Marcus said stiffly. The turnout is impressive. Thank you for coming, Sophia replied, her voice steady. I wasn't sure you would. Marcus's gaze shifted to her paintings, studying them with an intensity that surprised her. These are about us, aren't they? They're about me, Sophia corrected gently. My journey. A flicker of something, Recognition, perhaps, or regret, crossed his face. "You're talented," he admitted reluctantly. I never really looked before." The concession, small as it was, represented more acknowledgement than he'd given her art in years of marriage. But Sophia realized, with a clarity that felt like dawn breaking, that his approval no longer mattered the way it once had. "Mr. and Mrs. Reed?" Richard Harrington approached with his wife. "Quite the event you've put together, Sophie." "It's Sophia," she corrected, no longer willing to be diminished even in small ways. "And thank you." "I was just telling Marcus," Victoria added with practiced charm, "how impressed we are. Who knew you had such depth?" Painted New Beginnings. 3 months after the Meridian exhibition, Sophia sat in the sunlight that flooded her new studio. Not Daniel's spare room above the gallery, but her own space in an artist collective on the edge of the arts district, bright, airy, and filled with the organized chaos of ongoing projects. The Meridian showing had changed everything. Julian Mercer had indeed included 2 of her pieces in the Westlake Museum's contemporary exhibition. 3 private collectors had purchased works from her new series. And most significantly, she had received a grant from the Regional Arts Foundation to develop a body of work exploring themes of personal transformation. For the first time in her adult life, Sophia was supporting herself entirely through her art. Her phone chimed with a text from Nina. "Lunch at 1? Celebrating your interview." Sophia smiled, glancing at the arts magazine on her work table. Inside was a 2-page feature on her work, complete with photographs of her newest paintings and a profile that described her as a rising star in the contemporary scene whose work speaks to the universal experience of reclaiming one's authentic self. She texted back her confirmation, then returned to the canvas before her, part of a new series that felt both more confident and more vulnerable than anything she'd created before. A knock at the studio door interrupted her concentration. Sophia opened it to find Marcus standing there, looking somewhat out of place in his business attire amid the artistic surroundings of the collective. "I saw the article," he said by way of greeting. "Congratulations." "Thank you," Sophia replied, surprised by his appearance. They had spoken only through lawyers in recent months, negotiating the terms of their separation. "How did you find me?" "Nina told me," Marcus admitted. "I think she felt sorry for me." Sophia gestured him inside, curious rather than anxious about his presence. The studio, with its high ceilings and her work covering the walls, felt like a physical manifestation of the distance she'd traveled from their marriage. Marcus moved through the space slowly, studying each canvas with an attention he'd never given her work before. "These are different from what you showed at Meridian," he observed. "I'm not angry anymore," Sophia explained simply. "These are about possibility, not pain." He nodded, stopping before her newest piece, still unfinished but already showing the luminous quality that had become her signature. "The divorce papers came yesterday," he said finally. "I know. I received mine too." Marcus turned to face her, and Sophia was surprised to see genuine regret in his eyes. "I've been thinking about what you said that night at our apartment. About respect." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You were right. I never gave your work, or you, the respect you deserved." The admission, so long wished for, now felt like an artifact from another life. "Thank you for saying that," Sophia said gently. "Is there—" Marcus hesitated, an uncertainty in his manner that she'd rarely seen. "Is there any chance we could try again? Now that I understand?" The question hung between them, heavy with history and missed opportunities. Sophia considered the man before her, still handsome, still successful, now humbled by her accomplishments in a way she once would have found vindictively satisfying. But that satisfaction never came. Instead, she felt only compassion for both of them, for the years spent trying to be someone she wasn't, for his inability to see her true worth until others pointed it out. "I don't think so, Marcus," she said finally. "What happened between us wasn't just about my art. It was about who we are fundamentally. You need someone who fits into your world naturally. And I need someone who celebrates rather than tolerates mine. He nodded slowly, acceptance gradually replacing hope in his expression. Someone like that gallery owner, Daniel? Sophia smiled, thinking of Daniel, of quiet evenings discussing art and philosophy, of his unwavering support even before her success, of the slow-blooming relationship they were carefully nurturing. Perhaps, she acknowledged, we're taking things slowly, learning who we are together. Marcus looked around the studio once more, his gaze lingering on the magazine with her feature. You were never an embarrassment, Sophia, he said quietly. I was just too caught up in my own world to see the extraordinary woman you are. We both deserved better, Sophia replied, walking him to the door. I hope you find someone who complements your life the way you deserve, Marcus. After he left, Sophia returned to her canvas, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From that humiliating dinner to this moment of creative fulfillment and personal peace, the path had been painful but necessary. That evening, she met Daniel at a small bistro near the river. Their relationship had evolved naturally from friendship to something deeper, built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation of each other's passions. How was your day? He asked, his eyes crinkling at the corners in the way she'd grown to treasure. Interesting, Sophia replied. Marcus came to see me. Daniel raised an eyebrow but showed no jealousy or concern. How was that? Surprisingly healing, she admitted. Like closing a book I've finally finished reading. He reached across the table, taking her paint-stained fingers in his. And are you ready to start a new book? Sophia looked at their intertwined hands, then up to his face, kind, patient, seeing her completely. I think I already have. Later that night, they walked along the riverfront, the city lights reflecting in the water. Daniel pointed out constellations above them, his arm warm around her shoulders as he traced patterns in the night sky. I have something to show you, he said, leading her toward the gallery district. Echo Arts was closed for the evening, but Daniel unlocked the door, guiding her through the darkened space to a new exhibition being installed for the weekend opening. This is what I've been working on, he explained, turning on the gallery lights to reveal a stunning collection of contemporary works from across the region. And there, in the center wall, the position of honor, hung Sophia's triptych from Meridian, purchased by an anonymous collector who had insisted it be displayed publicly before joining their private collection. You did this? Sophia asked, turning to Daniel with tears in her eyes. The collector did, he said with a small smile. I may have suggested the public display part. Sophia stood before her work, seeing in the 3 panels not just her past journey, but a map for her future, from constraint to chaos to creation, from being diminished to being seen, from acceptance to celebration. Thank you, she whispered. Not just to Daniel, but to everyone who had helped her find her way. Nina with her unwavering friendship, Eliza who saw potential in her work, even Marcus whose dismissal had ultimately forced her to claim her own worth. Daniel wrapped his arms around her from behind, both of them gazing at her paintings. No thanks needed, he murmured against her hair. You did this, Sophia. You made yourself visible. In that moment, surrounded by art and held by someone who truly saw her, Sophia felt the final pieces of her transformation click into place. She had not only left them speechless, she had found her own voice, powerful and true, painting her way into a future entirely her own.